Community Matters.
97.3 Apple FM.
Don't just use it once then throw it away. Things can be used again, 'cause that's a cooler way. Let's recycle. Bottles and papers, or plastic and card, we can all recycle. It really isn't hard. It's Buster and Pong with the recycling song.
Many of us use the recycling sites in and around our areas, and I'm now at Priorswood, which is Somerset Waste Partnership's largest recycling site. It's run by Viridor, and I'm going to talk to Pete Summers, who is in charge of the site and indeed in charge of other operations in the Somerset area. Pete, what's your official title?
My official title is I'm a contract supervisor. I work for a contract manager and I oversee 8 sites in Somerset.
Now, 8 sites in Somerset. Taunton must be one of the largest.
Taunton is our largest site with the biggest waste throughput and largest visitor numbers. It services a big household area within the county, and it is exceedingly busy.
Yes, it does cover a very large area. We're standing at the moment by some of the recycling skips, marked card, natural wood, metal, man-made wood, and 101 other things as well. And it is obvious that you have a very large throughput of people on this site. In an average sort of day, how many people would come through here?
We average about 1,000 visits a day by members of the public. Last week we were up in the 1,500 region. Last Monday alone, that was due to the nice weather, people getting out in the gardens and doing some clearing, so it was a very, very busy day.
I had to admit I looked behind my shed when that nice weather was on, and I too went to the recycling site near us, which is at Poole. Now, it's obvious to me that this is a very complex process because you're very thorough in the way you sift what comes in. So give me an idea of some of the materials that you do actually sort out.
We have recycling facilities, we have disposal facilities for 32 commodities, from everything from cardboard to garden waste, metals, plastic bottles, plasterboard, glass bottles. We ask for as much of it to be sorted before it comes into the site, so when the user turns up it makes it quick and easy for them to dispose of. There is a bin here which is for cannot be recycled at this facility. That's where we get the general black bags. What we do with them is we ask people to pre-sort them before they come here. If not, our guys will try and retrieve recyclables after the user has left site, just so we're maximising the recycling amount that we receive here.
What sort of percentage do you manage to recycle as a whole of everything that comes in?
We're about 75% of this site, which is very, very good for the amount of tonnage. We do about 900 to 1,000 tonnes a month at this site alone.
Well, in the bad old days, of course, it nearly all went to landfill, and there were clay pits and one thing and another in the area that rapidly got filled. These days, things are far more sophisticated and complex, and I'm sure we'll be looking at some of the procedures a little bit later on during this walk around. So, looking down at the bins, what do you get the most of?
It peaks throughout times of the year. Obviously, this time we're coming into the spring. We've had a recent bout of nice weather, so we're going to be now going into the season where a lot of our waste coming through is garden clippings, which we have a facility on site which gets turned into a compost. It's dealt with on site. It goes through various turning processes and various testing regimes. It's then rebagged and sold on our site as a soil conditioner for £2.50.
Well, this is absolutely brilliant because it never leaves the site from when it comes in as rubbish to when it goes out as compost. I notice you call it Revive, which I rather like.
It is because there is a cradle to grave sort of process of it. It's coming from, the people can see when they bring the waste that it's come from their garden, and then in the root end it can end back on their garden after the vigorous process it goes through. It is a very good source of neutralising soil, and it's a very popular commodity.
Sounds absolutely brilliant. I think what we better do is walk our way along the bins and find out a little bit more about the site. Well, Pete, as we've been walking up the skips, I've been wondering what happens to some of the things that go in it. We do split wood into natural wood and man-made wood. Now, why is this?
There's 2 different markets for it. Natural wood can be used, it goes to a sorting plant where it's chipped up and sold on for wood pellets or wood chippings. And man-made wood, which contains hazardous materials of glue and is bonded together, it's a lot more harder to separate. That's chipped up and used to cap off tops of landfill cells.
Are there health hazards with the resin-based artificial woods?
There has got to be some sort of underlying health hazards with MDF, which are still being uncovered at the minute.
We were also talking about the cardboard skip, which fascinated me because you told me that it was almost a closed loop, the recycling of this. What happens to that cardboard?
We have a process here on site where it's sorted and segregated into different grades. From there it's baled up and is exported to China, and comes back to us as cardboard in an end loop.
So it's collected here and at all the recycling centres, goes halfway around the world, is recycled into more cardboard, and we get it all back again.
That's correct.
I rather like that in a funny sort of way. I've got thoughts of all these large ships in the Bristol Channel full of cardboard that's come from Priorswood. And of course all the numerous other sites. And talking of the other sites, you mentioned you look after a fair number of them. Where are the others?
The other ones, they're sort of from Frome all the way down to Chard. There is 18 sites at present in Somerset. The role is shared between myself and another contract supervisor. We're going to close 2 sites at the end of the month and open the 5 sites for 7 days a week. So the public are losing 2 sites which have been community recycling sites which the public have been asked to pay for, but unfortunately the needs haven't been met there, so we have to close the loop there and put the money back into opening the 7-day service.
Yes, I'm going to go into this a little bit later in our tour, but I'm sure there's a lot more to see. So let's move on further down the bins. Now, most of the things we come here to tip, we can tip free, but there are some things you charge for.
There's three commodities we charge for, which are hardcore and soil, rubble tiles, car tyres, and gas bottles. We charge for these because they're not classed as household waste; they fall into the industrial waste category. So we're allowed to levy a charge. The charges range from £2.90 a bag up to about £45 for a large gas bottle and tyre.
This does seem a lot of money when you add up the quantities of some of the rubbish that can be dumped commercially. Presumably this is a major cost to them.
These sites are only for householders, so it is just general householders that should use them, and the idea of charging is to keep away the people who do the commercial work. We do offer commercial facilities throughout Somerset, but the general householder are starting to suffer now because people are coming in and doing building work for them, and instead of getting rid of the rubbish now, they're saying to them, you have to leave it, which means when they're coming to us there is a cost. It was very hard to implement 3 years ago when we first went through. There was lots of negative feedback towards the staff on site because we're now saying to them, you have to pay to dispose, and the guys on the front line really bore the brunt of it.
This must be even more critical now because funds are limited in many departments of government, in many departments of local authorities, and therefore you've really got to help the resource that you have pay its way.
Definitely, and it was about working together to get to a point of saying, initially we had to implement these charges, otherwise we could have been without a lot less recycling centres in Somerset. We are managing to maintain the facilities, but we've had to help him implement these charges and enforce them.
Well, we're still walking down the row of large skips here. There's a couple of things I was going to ask you. Now, these days plasterboard is singled out as an individual material. Why is that?
Because the plasterboard produces a hazardous gas.
It produces a hazardous gas. Now, this is something which is unusual. So why is it such a common material in the building trade?
It must be a cheap, a low-cost material to produce, and I believe it's more of a case of when it gets wet and it starts to store it produces gas and lets it off. That's why it can't be landfilled anymore, so it has to be separately processed. There's a facility in Bristol that we send our plasterboard to.
And then, of course, there's the old favourite asbestos, which is always in the news. How do you deal with that?
Asbestos now is the staff will have no contact with asbestos anymore. We have a policy which asks householders to double wrap the bags when they arrive on site to inform us that it's here. We'll unlock the container, let them load it, and lock the container up after them. We'll accept 16 sheets as a maximum off of householders. The staff's involvement with it has slacked right off, and the amount coming through has sort of diminished as well.
Yes, I suppose as the years go on, asbestos building materials in buildings that are demolished or altered get less and less, and probably just as well. It is only when it's all cut up and turned into dust that it's hazardous, isn't it?
It's when it starts to become broken out from its natural form is when it starts to release dust and that. And obviously there's different types of asbestos. There's brown, blue and white, and obviously two of them are more dangerous than the others.
Are there any particular materials that householders tend to come and dump or try to dump that are actually hazardous to them that they may not realise?
I suppose a lot of people, when they bring in stuff like household chemicals, stuff like old weed killers, stuff that's been lying around in sheds for years, they probably don't know what they're dealing with there, or some people buy houses which has been left in and they're not too sure of what is in there and they bring it to us.
As rules and regulations have changed, the world is theoretically a much safer place now, and there's certainly a lot more awareness of the hazards that do exist. What about things like old paint and varnish? What do people do with those and what do you do with them?
It's separated when it's on site into two different types of water-based and chemical-based. The chemical-based, we have a specialist contractor that comes around and picks it up, and the water-based is so great. Some water-based stuff will be sold in our reuse shop. They might bring in a perfectly used pot of paint, didn't match the colour they wanted to go for, so they think, well, so we can pass it back on to our reuse contractor to sell from his shop here.
Are we a wasteful nation?
We are a nation that definitely throws away too much waste.
Yes, I do agree with you. When you see some of the things that come in, you wonder how on earth they could possibly end up here, and there must be another use for them. And of course, you found another use for some of them. We'll be talking about this a little bit later with the reuse shop. So let's carry on our walk around the site here at Priorswood. Pete, there are so many interesting things around here that another thought has occurred to me that we haven't mentioned glass. Now, what do you do with glass?
Here at Priorswood, this is a multifunctional site, and behind us we have a big building, what's called a materials recycling facility. Stuff from the civic amenity site, the recycling sites, like glass bottles, cardboard, will all go across there, where it's processed and sorted, ready to be sold back into the recyclable market.
It is an enormous building. I mean, we can't go in at the moment. Maybe one day I will. But an awful lot of work must go on in there. Give me an idea of some of those processes. We've mentioned cardboard and glass. What else happens in there?
There is a sorting and recycling facility for plastic, metal and aluminium cans. We have a small trade waste facility here, so commercial customers can dispose of their waste in there, where it's put into residual, where it's sorted into machines, where it's bulked up from there and goes off to disposal points.
There must be a lot of traffic on and off the site. Are you pushed for space here and need somewhere bigger?
As we said, it is a very busy site here, and you can always want more space, can't you, to increase your operation? And it would be nice to sort of think that with how recycling is going, that we'd be in the position to increase our footprint here.
Well, certainly I've visited this site on a number of occasions, and occasionally I've had to queue on the ramp coming in for 5 minutes or so. Do you get much congestion on site at peak periods, particularly when the weather is good and the gardens are being turned over?
When the weather is good, it does get very busy here, and the idealist thing is they turn up and they want to get as close as they can to the skip they want to use, so they don't use the full accessibility of the site. And especially sort of the last couple of weekends where it has been nice, there has been queues, but working with Somerset Waste Partnership, we have implemented a queue camera, so you can log in via the internet and look and see how busy the queue is. So if you're out shopping in town, you think, I've got some recycling to do, let's have a look, I'll queue now, let's leave it another hour, or come back. So we're looking at managing that via traffic management systems and using technologies to try and beat it.
Is there a logical layout in the order of the skips? Do you work out which ones are going to be used the most and lay them out in such a way that cars don't build up at one skip?
A lot of that will depend on the user when they're loading at home. If we can educate them, sort of, they know once they've been here, and they know that what's at the front has to go near the back end of the car, so they can turn up and do it in little cycles would be the ideal way. But apart from that, it is about having the involvement of the staff, making sure that they're on the back of the cars, making sure the people are through as quick as they can, so the quicker they can unload people and get them out, the less congestion there will be, and the easier it will be for the site user.
You mentioned, of course, that if you can get us into the habit of loading individual things in individual places in the car, it'll make the recycling centre run much more smoothly. Do you think we're learning our lessons?
There's been a big improvement. Is sort of people, once they've been here a few times, they work it out for themselves about what they can bring and what's in certain areas, and also it's sort of been a bit of an adverse effect is what's collected on the doorstep now, because they're collecting plastic bottles, cardboard on your doorstep, so the amount coming through the recycling centres has sort of petered off at that side, but the bigger bulkier stuff that they don't collect does seem to come through us a bit more.
Well, you mentioned that one of the ways you recycle things is to put them into the reuse shop, so let's make our way down to the end of the site and talk a little bit about that. Well, here we are at the end of the site outside the brand new reuse shop. How long has it been here?
The reuse shop's been here about 3 to 4 months now. The idea of it is, over the years we've had lots of complaints about why we can't sell stuff off of the site back to the general user. And the complaints there is some of the stuff's still perfectly serviceable. And especially at a time now where it's economically, people are struggling, they want a low-cost solution. So we have a contractor who used to take the bric-a-brac here and sell from various outlets. We've now provided a facility here to sell the stuff from site. It's very popular because it shows a another sort of cradle to the grave reuse, because people have bought something in and someone who's on a low cost, low budget sees it and thinks, well, I can use that, let's buy it from the recycling centre. It's at a recycling centre, so it really does send the message of recycling home to people.
You say the facility is being very well used. How many people a day do you reckon come through it?
I off the top of my head, I don't know numbers. There is peak times. It's very, very busy. Lots and lots of interest. Because obviously, if the people are on site at the time, they think, well, let's just have a look, and it's a real big positive for the public as a whole.
Do you occasionally find things that are of some value that people have just chucked away because they're house clearing?
There are some strange sort of commodities do come through where people have had new houses, new living rooms, new tables, and they've moved it in, and it just doesn't suit the surroundings, so they do end up with us. But that goes back to the throwaway society.
Yeah, the throwaway society. Well, if you're going to throw anything away, I can't think of a more organised site than this one to do it on. And rest assured that so much is being recycled and there's so much good being done with what you are throwing away. A little earlier on our trip round, we mentioned that a couple of amenity sites are closing, but to compensate for that, the majority of sites are now opening 7 days a week. So tell me what the new situation will be.
Basically, we will lose 2 sites in Somerset, which will take us down to 16, but 5 of the sites will open 7 days a week. 3 years ago, we cut 2 days a week opening times on all of our sites. And it wasn't a very, very popular choice with our site users, because we're saying 2 days a week and half a day on a Sunday, where they're losing the facility to dispose of waste. So to compensate now, 5 of the bigger sites will now open 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, from 8 till 4 every day. The other sites that remain open will sit in with the normal hours. They'll still remain closed 2 days during the week, and they'll offer a late night service on a Monday and half a day on a Sunday.
Can you do this with existing staffing levels?
We're lucky that with the 2 sites that were closing, we didn't have to make any redundancies. We're going to have a slight increase in labour, which will be absorbed by an agency, just for the time being, just to gauge how busy we're going to be. But it's very positive for our staff, because a lot of them were forced to work all weekend, every weekend, so now they can fit in a rota system and they can sort of enjoy a bit of time with the families again.
Sounds like a good idea to me. So positive things not only for the people using the recycling centre, but for the people working there.
Definitely very, very positive. You know, it was a big bugbear effort to committing people to work all weekend, and some of them are now going to have the chance to sort of make precious time with families.
I do like to end an interview on a positive note. Paul Summers, thank you very much indeed for taking your time to show me around the site.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm delighted now to be able to talk to Nick Cater, who's the Senior Communications Officer for the Somerset Waste Partnership. Nick, this is a very impressive site. Can you explain to me how it works and how you involve contractors in the process?
Well, we have a long-term deal with 2 contractors to do recycling for us. Keir May Gurney do all the recycling at the curbside, and then Viridor does all the recycling involving the recycling sites. All around the county, they run the sites for us, and we have a long-term deal, multi-year deal with them, worth many millions of pounds. We pay them to run the sites, and then obviously they've got an incentive to recycle as much as possible, because part of that deal is recognising that they sell on the materials that they can recover. So we get a very efficient service out of them. All of our recycling sites, they are very efficient machines to sort of transfer what people don't want into something that companies want to turn into packaging or new products, and really make good use of the materials that are available from Somerset.
Well, presumably if you need new processing plant, new buildings, new area, then this can be financed by the company that actually has the contract.
Yeah, a very good example of that is our new anaerobic digestion plant at Walpole near Bridgewater, where they've come in. We've been able to guarantee that we're going to supply them a certain amount of food waste, 19,000 tonnes a year of food waste from the households of Somerset, which is going to be turned into clean green power, but Viridor has gone out and financed the £10 million to build the plant. So it's a good public-private cooperation there. It's very efficient, and everybody's got an incentive to do more and do better. And so we, off the back of that, we're then encouraging obviously the Somerset public, every household or every resident, to do the best they can.
Can I pick up on the point you mentioned about generating power from household waste? How is this done?
Well, the anaerobic digester, it takes in all the food waste, and using billions of what we've dubbed burping bacteria, they turn the food waste into methane, into biogas, which can then be translated and help to generate electricity. And we feed that into the national grid, and then what's left is a kind of compost-like material, which then we can use in agriculture as a sort of fertiliser come compost to improve the soil.
I've often wondered about the quantities of food waste from homes. People, again, can be very wasteful from time to time, and I believe you mentioned 19,000 tonnes a year.
19,000 tonnes. That's not all the food waste that we could collect. If people would take more food waste out of their rubbish bins and put it in their waste, the food waste bins, we'd get a lot more. We capture about half of the food waste in Somerset, which is not a high percentage. I mean, it's very good by a lot of the rest of the country, but we'd love to do more, and we can make use of it. Every single tonne, every single old apple core or chicken bones and so on can be turned into electricity. So it's a valuable resource in that sense that can be made into something even more useful.
What's the scale of the generation?
Well, the anaerobic digester at the moment can probably generate enough electricity to run 3,000 homes for a whole year.
It's quite mind-blowing. The complexities of recycling are truly wonderful, and also the systems in place to make it all work efficiently are very impressive. What about plans for the future? Is the site here going to stay the same in Taunton, or are there plans for bigger and better facilities?
We're always looking to add new materials so we can recycle more. We're always looking to improve the sites. For example, Taunton was the first place where we put in a queue cam. So over the internet you can see whether there's a queue of traffic, and you can judge whether or not you want to pop down because there's no traffic, or leave it for a little while because there's quite a queue. So that helps people, so they're not jamming up the road outside here when they could be doing something else.
Are there materials coming along which are causing headaches or will cause headaches in the future?
Well, all materials need to be used. One example, for example, is that Somerset produces 25,000 used mattresses a year. These are immensely complicated ways. They have to be physically disassembled by hand, and the materials are not worth that much unless you can find another use for them. And so on. So we're wrestling whether or not there's any way in which we can get it to recycle mattresses, for example. Now that won't happen immediately, but it's an example of the way in which every single material that's being produced, we're looking at ways in which can we find somebody who wants what it would be turned into. Metals and glass and plastics, that's easy. Mattresses and other things are more complex. We're still looking at the issue of the sort of mixed plastics. At the moment we only collect plastic bottles from the curbside. We'd love to do more if somebody else would buy them from us or use them in some kind of way. It's finding that end use. What can it be turned into?
So we're getting into a three-way situation here, and the three main points seem to me: one is to educate the public to recycle things, not to throw them in the waste skips and one thing or another, but to recycle them in the proper way, to separate their wastes. The second thing is to build plants like this which are incredibly efficient, which can make the maximum of what comes in through the gateway. And the third is to encourage industry to use the products that you produce and to find new ways of using them to make their own manufacturing processes more innovative and more efficient.
Absolutely, and one of the keys to this is if we can continue to use this thing of the Sort It Plus system at the curbside and sorting things out before you come to a recycling centre, the cleaner the stream of materials, the more it's a concentrated single material, the better it is, the better price we get, the more people will want it, and the easier it is to turn it into other goods. So again, if people can recycle carefully, recycle a lot, and make sure it's well separated in that kind of way, then there's no end to what we could be recycling in the future.
Nick Cater, I think it's been a very positive experience going around Priorswood and seeing exactly what happens to our waste, and I look forward to future developments. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thanks very much indeed, and do come along in a 7-day working, 5 sites, 7 days a week, including Sundays until 4 p.m.
I'll be there. Thank you very much.
What you throw away depends on you, but recycling means it will come back as something new.
So what you throw away depends on you, but recycling means it will come back as something new.
For the caring community of Taunton.